Let's start by you telling us your name and who you are in Baltimore.
I'm Marty Bement, and I'm a resident here in Fells Point, and I'm a residential builder. I used to be a developer, and I used to be in government. I worked for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and actually moved here from Atlanta in the early 70s because I was transferred. I had a specialty in Model Cities program, urban renewal, and community planning and development. I also majored in urban studies with a minor in journalism in college. And that's the general thing. I'm a father, we have sons. My wife Elizabeth is a very strong community activist. My rental properties here in my office and my home are 2.5 blocks from each other. And we love living in Fells Point.
Awesome. So you were talking about the conversation concerning Baltimore needing quote unquote density, which then leads to the conversation about high rises. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I have felt for a long time, because I've done a lot of work in the historic districts in Baltimore. I have lived in and rebuilt houses in Charles Village, Bolton Hill, now in Fells Point. And I've done a lot of other historic districts where I haven't lived. But over the years, I've been fascinated by the history of Baltimore, Philadelphia, and cities, especially port cities on the East Coast. And I recently met a man, Charles Duff, who lives in Bolton Hill and is, I think, brilliant about and very, very knowledgeable about the history of the row house and how that all happened and why does Baltimore, why does Philadelphia, why does Boston, why does Providence, Rhode Island, why do these cities look so much alike? Why do they function so much alike? And as it turns out, this is his book that he wrote, The North Atlantic Cities. So in a way, Baltimore is a child of the growth of row houses, which started in Holland. And like a lot of things involving cities, things start with fires. So Amsterdam had great fires, and they decided to build back in brick rather than wood. That's happened here. That's happened in England. And the Dutch decided to build next to each other, to build row houses, and that they should have rules about how they go together. Because the earlier Dutch houses could have different heights and different depths and different ways of dealing with things. The Dutch also wanted to use their canal system. So without going on and on, because it's sort of complex, they started the row house movement. The English later took it on, starting in London and then moving out to smaller cities. And the English polished it up a bit and made basically rules and regulations about the front facades all being in the same plane, about not going, keeping the same height, 3 or 4 stories, the fenestration of windows and doors. And they had interesting descriptions of how that was defined. So they called them regular and gentle architecture. And meaning that the architecture, I guess the gentle word, was not meant to offend the neighbor properties. And the regular meant that they followed rules. And that came to the U.S. And, here we are in Fells Point, which basically was an early English town, a colonial town. And we have obvious evidence of it here, but it's all over the city. And what Charlie has recently been talking about is density, and the fact that obviously when we have row houses, we have high density. And I've always been a little bit angry about meetings where otherwise well-intended people will say, no, you need to have mid-rise and high-rise building and more density, and that's what makes a city work. And I think that's a lot of hoo-ha. And Charles has done some comparisons of Dutch cities and American cities, their density and our density, and what works to make a city function properly. It turns out, for example, Rotterdam, Holland, and Baltimore, Maryland have the same density. They have the same, almost same geographic pattern and size and the same population. And Rotterdam is very successful at that density. And we're somewhat successful at that density. But as Charles notes, the difference is Rotterdam has a great public system for transportation. And of course, because it's Holland, great bike lanes. And they also have not pushed out grocery stores and drugstores and the things that you need to have a walkable community so you can walk from one place to another. So his point is we don't have to listen to this higher density business. What we have to concentrate on are on things like public transportation and doing away with food deserts and deserts, and other deserts and that kind of thing.
So why do you think that there is this push for high rises under the guise of higher density?
I don't know, but I honestly don't know. I can't figure that out. I think part of it is just money making on the part of developers. Most of the buildings we now see are called platform construction. The first floor is basically concrete, and that's where the parking goes or commercial goes. And then the upper floors are typically apartments. Sometimes the first floor will also be apartments. Well, they've got a format and they know how to do it and they can repeat it. And it means that a little piece of land can produce profit from a higher number of units. And what we see here in Fells Point and all over is the apartments are getting smaller and smaller. And there's nothing wrong with that, but smallness in general. But just, I think that's the big calling card for it is more density for them means more money. And it's an easy format. And there are a lot of articles in architectural and planning magazines that talk about the fact that we're getting into a very plain Jane architectural society. Every city has the same buildings going up. They have a certain formula, and the windows are all looking the same. And
kind of boring.
Yeah, kind of boring.
Okay, well, thank you for that awesome explanation about density in our city and how it relates to, European cities of similar density.